Welcome to the second part of this lesson, and we're just going to go through a few more examples here. So we're going to go through some examples now without a number line and see how we go with it. All right, so the first one is 67 minus negative 12. We know that when we're minusing a negative, we rewrite it as plus whatever this is. So now we just have 67 plus 12, and we know that's going to be 79. We come over here, and this time we're going to rewrite this as negative 24. When I'm plussing a negative, I know it's just minus whatever this is. So it's going to be negative 24 minus 8, and that's going to be negative 32. We come over here. This time I'm going to rewrite it as negative 9 plus 129 because I am minusing a negative, and I know when that occurs it becomes a positive. And now once I do this, it's going to be 120 as my answer. Let's come and do some more. Could you pause the video and see if you could answer these for yourselves? So the way in which you would go about it is you would say this is going to be negative 120. Then I'm plussing a negative, so it's going to be negative 95. And when I do this, I'm going to get negative 215. I come over here, this is going to be negative 25 minus a negative plus 30. So my answer is going to be 5. And then here, it's going to be plus as well, 9 plus 27. So that's going to be 36. So hopefully you did well with those. And make sure you are pausing, giving it a go yourself, and then hitting play on the video again. You're not going to get much out of it if you're just watching me do it. All right. Let's go through some of these in which we're trying to find the missing number. Sometimes these can be a little tricky, but if we take our time, we'll be fine with it. Okay, so the first one here, as you can see, I have 9 minus some number is going to be equal to 15. The first thing that we should notice here is that 9 is smaller than 15. So 9 subtract what would give me a bigger number than 9. It seems kind of crazy at first until we realize that this number here must be negative, because if it's negative, then it's going to be 9 plus something is equal to 15, and 9 plus 6 is equal to 15. So this must be negative 6 in here. So as you can see, we kind of thought about it logically and realized that we must be minusing a negative so that we get this positive for our answer to be bigger. Now we come over here. Here I'm going 3 plus some number is giving me a negative number. So my number is actually smaller than what I started with, but I'm adding. So what's going on here? Well, obviously it's going to have to be negative in order for this to occur. And let me see if I can just do this a bit neater. Negative. So in other words, what it's saying is 3 minus what is going to be negative 35. We think about it for a second and we realize this is going to be 38. So it's going to be negative 38 as my answer. Let's come over here. This is going to be negative 3 minus what is going to be equal to 22. Again, we're getting bigger than what we started with, right? So that means immediately we know this is going to be negative. So that means it's going to be negative 3 plus something is going to be equal to 22. Now, what's that going to be? We think about it for a second. It's going to be 25. So it's just a matter of thinking it through. And if you think it through, you'll be fine with it. If you are struggling with getting to this 25, do remember that I did show you a way to think about this. Let's just say you couldn't get that 25. You're finding it a bit tricky. What you can do is just do the opposite to what this is. So remember we talked about the opposite. So this is negative 3. If I plus 3 here and I plus 3 here, this goes away. And then 22 plus 3 is 25. And what it's saying is that this blank space is equal to 25, and then we know it has to be negative, so that's why we put the negative in there. So just another way to think about it. We'll touch upon this idea a bit more, the idea of doing the opposite to both sides. It is a bit tricky, and we do talk about it more in our algebra and equation section, so don't stress too much if it's just a bit too much. All right, let's keep on going. We come here and we're going to do the same thing again. We're just going to ask ourselves, all right, what would this number have to be in order to get negative 28? So I've got some number, I'm subtracting 5 from it, and I'm going to get negative 28. This, for some people, is a bit more abstract to go about, and some of us will just be able to think about that long enough and say, hey, it's obviously going to be negative 23 here because I'm getting to a more negative number, and think about it that way. For some of us, it might be a bit tricky to do that. And this is where using that technique, which I just mentioned, might come in handy. If you could go, hey, if I plus 5 here to get rid of that, and I plus 5 to here, so I have to do the same to both sides, then I just have to ask myself, what's negative 28 plus 5? Well, it's going to be negative 23. So that means that this blank space is equal to negative 23. So that means my answer is negative 23 here. So do you see how by doing that, I was able to get my answer? It might seem a bit tricky, and maybe you can just kind of look at it and get the answer, but I want to show you that alternative as well. Let's go to our next question here. The first thing I would actually do here is rewrite this. So this is something plus 3, because we know that minusing a negative is just the same as plussing, equals negative 14 here. And then we could look at this for a while and say, hey, I know what this is going to be. It's going to be negative 17. So that means my answer is negative 17 here. Again, if you were struggling to get that answer, let's say you couldn't figure out that it was negative 17, what you could do instead is you could say, all right, I'm minusing 3 here. That goes away. Negative 14 minus 3 is negative 17. So that's what the blank space is going to equal. Another way of thinking about it. But if you can just kind of think about the original question for long enough to get the answer, feel free to do that as well. Let's go on to this question right here. So something plus 8, because I've got minusing a negative, is equal to 4. So what is that going to be? We think about it for a second. So something is going to be 4. It's going to be negative 4. So you just might need some time to think about it. So just don't be afraid of staying at this point for a while and just giving it a good thought. What's it going to be? It's going to be negative 4. Negative 4 like that. And again, if you were struggling to get that negative 4, what you could do is say, hey, if I get rid of this 8 by subtracting 8 from this side, and I subtract 8 from that side, what I'm going to end up with is 4 minus 8 is negative 4. Another way of going about it. All right, so that's it. Hopefully you found that helpful. And yeah, just spend your time thinking about these for long enough, and just give yourself time to get to the right answer. Don't rush it. All right, I'll see you in the next lesson.